Okay, so this basically gets all the information from the clients table and then it's supposed to return all the result. Okay, so now let's go back to the controller, and instead of just creating the fake array, fake information about the users, let's call a model this user model get all users, and we're going to store that. Before we're able to do this, we need to load that model. So let's also look into the examples and see how we can load the model properly. I forgot how to do that exactly. Okay, so this is how we do it. So here we need to say load user model and then call this function. So before we do anything else, let's see if it worked at all. Let's do the var dump over here and then let's make it die. So when we go to the user index, all it's going to do is load the model, call that function that we wrote, and then dump the data. I don't think this is going to work yet, but let's test it. So notice how it gave an error message and it didn't work. So I'll show you exactly why it didn't work. But in CodeIgniter, when you're accessing the database, you need to tell it which database to access. And although we put information in database.php, unless you write this one line, it's going to require the database information for every single model. Okay, so we're going to write something to say, whenever you call this model, access the default database. Okay, so actually, now I was looking at what we need to do to make this work. In the user.php, turns out you actually have to add this to specify that you're going to connect to the default database contained in database.php. So add that, and then I noticed that another thing that we didn't do is when we in the database.php we forgot to tell it which database name to connect. So in my case, it's the test database that contains the information that I want. So it contains the clients table and all that. That's contained in the test database. So yours may be different. So you need to put the name of the database in your local host, and then it would work. So now that I did this, let's var dump the data and then die. And when I run it, it displayed, it got the information from the model correctly, and it returned the result. So now instead of var dumping in and then dying, we're going to pass that data just to the view. Okay, so we're going to go to user list all, and here before we do for each, let's do the for each, and then let's comment this out, and let's just var dump the user. Let's see how this works. So it did work, and let's make this a little bit more interesting. So instead of the name, let's do first name, last name, and that's good enough for now. Oh, let's do the email address as well. Okay, so now that we know that this worked, and notice how before I write a lot of codes, I do a lot of var dump and I test to see whether things are working up to that spot. So I'm going to do user, and we're going to call the first name, and over here we're going to do the user's last name, and here we're going to display the user's email. So let's test it, and it worked. So this is a good example where the controller did all the business logic and then passed the information to the view, and the model just does specific things, and most of the time it gets information from the database. So for example, in the edit, if you needed to get information from a bunch of different places, then you may be loading multiple models, getting multiple functions,